Welcome to Adults Only Comedy Berlin. Today it's just me. I've finally got my shit together, and I came back from Australia on Wednesday, the 12th of April. And to be honest, in the first few days where I was like, oh, I should record a podcast and like update what's been happening, I was so depressed. I was not in a good place. Really happy to see all my Berlin people. Like the community, the comedy community, my friends, boys, all really, really lovely. Just my home environment was starkly empty. You know, after being with my family for like 4 weeks, you know, in the house of my brother with his wife, 4 kids now, and with my stepdad and my mum also staying in the same house, and then like my stepbrother and stepsister visiting every few days, just constantly like surrounded by people who I love and love me. And then I come back to Berlin and I've got lots of people around, but my apartment is very just me. And anyway, so I wasn't really in a podcasting mood. I was really needing to evaluate my life choices. And yeah, but now I'll be getting some podcast guests happening, and I will be back on. I'm going to do a bit of a at least like image rebranding of the pod as well, and get a bit serious and finally get this shit up on Patreon with videos. So that's all in the pipeline. But yeah, I wanted to give a little bit of like a final kind of like a recap and closing out of the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. I had a really good time there. If you haven't listened to the episodes with Andrew Portelli and Aidan Jones, I really recommend them. I love those guys. Really happy I'm friends with them, and got to spend so much time. Well, got to spend quite a bit more time with Andrew because he was also in Adelaide when I was there, but really great to have caught up with them and to have them as colleagues in Melbourne. So yeah, check those out. But the festival overall in Melbourne compared to the Adelaide one, there were way more places to spot. You know, I did probably 4 or 5 other people's shows, which was awesome. And just to try out newer material, as well as, you know, just do stuff that's not in my solo. I met a bunch of other comedians too. So it was a bit more, there was, you know, it's a comedy festival. So it was way more collaboration and running into other people, other comedians, and getting to know them. And Aidan Jones had the premiere of his film that he did on the Edinburgh Festival. I forget what it's called, but he did a screening of that in Melbourne, and I went to that. And yeah, and so these festivals being my first ever festivals, you know, for comedians who are interested in doing festivals, you know, I think, obviously, be real with yourself. It's going to take a while before you actually have it as a profitable venture. I didn't lose money, which is amazing, and I am super grateful for how that all worked out. I could have made more money for sure, and I've learned some things like, you know, I can definitely charge more for my tickets. You know, I could probably pay less for a venue, although my venue was amazing. If you're in Melbourne, please support Red Betty. They were really great. I didn't pay that much for my venue, but and the value that they brought, amazing. Let me just lick their assholes completely. But yeah, really love my venue, and it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. But yeah, little learnings around ticketing, marketing. You know, if you're wanting to do a festival, you know, running meta ads, useless, absolutely useless. So you can give Facebook a big fuck off if you're doing festivals, because I asked every single person that came through the door at both the Adelaide Fringe and the Melbourne Festival, and every single one of them found my show because they were scrolling through the festival website and they saw the name of my show. So big tip, have an eye-catching name, and don't put any money into meta advertising, because it's not the registration fee that you pay. You know, most people are going to find you because of your listing in the festival guide. So now, insight number 1. Insight number 2, which I may have already talked about, dark comedy in Australia. Audiences need a fair warning. I'll just slide over that. And then what else about the festival? Just it was really wonderful performing to. I had friends and family come, and that was great. Like a lot of them know all of the failures of my life, so some of the punchlines weren't a surprise, but they all genuinely enjoyed it. But and it was really nice showing them what I do, and and also proving to the bar that there was another woman who had her show. She just did 2 nights, and on both those nights, she had people there that she knew. And my first week in Melbourne, numbers weren't great. I got like 10, 11, and then like 17 in audience, and then like 19, but I knew nobody. But then the next week, one of my shows, I had like 27 people in there, and I only didn't know 6 of them, which was a new experience for me in Melbourne. All these people from my deep history. Like I had people come from my insurance job that I worked at, and that was so nice seeing them, and it was so lovely. But and then I had people from my hospo days, so like my crazy drunk kitchen and bar staff friends, and actually it was one of my good friends who derailed my show the most, which only good friends can really do. Talking drunkenly in the back, kind of reacting to my jokes. It's like, babe, what are you thinking? And I couldn't really, when you know someone and they're heckling you, it's difficult. But that was, classic Melbourne Aussie times. So that was the Melb Festival. I will be going back, and I am excited to go back and fucking get better at it and spend a bunch of time with all the fam again and build that shit. I did have a couple of really nice dates in Melbourne. I think I kind of signed off on the Adelaide episode where I said I had a date that night, and that was fun. That was fun. It's kind of weird divulging really personal details in a podcast episode where it's just me. So I'm not sure how. Like, I prefer them to come up naturally in a conversation. But let's see what I spill out from these dates. But the Adelaide date, nice guy, not into period sex, which was interesting. And I'd been meditating on that as a topic anyway. And then that happened, and so I offered something else, and then okay, no, I'm not going into this. but basically it was a fun date. It was a fun date. He wanted me to spend the night, which was really cute, and I was like, no, I've got to fly out the next day. So got an Uber, whose name, my driver's name was Dexter. I was like, this isn't a good sign. But got home safe and sound, and then had a nice journey to Melbourne the next day. So then in Melbourne, I had 2 dates with 2 different guys, and basically what I've taken away from my dating in Australia. So in my 5 weeks in Australia, I had 3 dates, and all 3 of them were cool guys, good chats, fun sex, open to like drugs, but in like a healthy way, and what else was it? And felt safe, attractive, and I kind of stepped away from my Tindering experience in Australia, and I was like, you know what? I'm good at this now. Like I didn't waste a single date on someone that I didn't want to spend, multiple hours with. So just a word out to anyone who's still like, dating apps. I think you can make them work for you. I really can't speak on the topic of getting a relationship out of them, but yeah, just be cutthroat. If any interaction isn't feeling good when you're chatting to someone on the app, just let it go. Like as soon as you're not feeling into it, just let it go. Some people will call that ghosting, but other people say that if you haven't met them, it's not ghosting. But yeah, just listen to your intuition, absolutely, and only put energy into times that actually, like, to interactions that feel good. And yeah, I had just really lovely experiences. The first guy in Melbourne, yeah, really like different kind of personality, but just so Aussie. Like all of them were just so beautifully Aussie, and yeah, and I'm not going to divulge all the details on him. I feel like that's weirdly exposing, but really cool guy. Had like a 13th floor apartment, amazing views in South Yarra. He had a sauna on his balcony, just like a bunch of, comfort. And, solid full-time job. The night that we met, he'd just been to see I just said Obama. Yep, that's his name. Barack Obama, present in Melbourne. And, just really fun chats. He got me an Uber the next morning. It wasn't Uber Pool, but he said that was a mistake. Whatever. And then the next guy, that sounds terrible. And then the other lovely person that I met, I'm still talking to the first guy in Melbourne as well, and as well as the second person that I met, who's really cool. He may or may not listen to this episode. Really really cool guy, and we just vibed very well. Spent like an hour talking about LSD experiences and other drug things. Like he's gotten into drugs much later in life, and so very 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 informed and cautious, but enthusiastic. And I have to say, like, that was probably one of the coolest dates I've had for a while. Well, look, credit to a lot of people that I see, but this guy, he takes me back to his place, and like he's got a whole basement. I hope this doesn't expose him. A whole basement full of pinball machines, like super retro up to modern ones. He's like, all right, choose a couple and you can play pinball. And so played on these really cool old pinball machines. And he knows all about them. He was explaining like the sound, like how the sounds were made in the old ones. And anyway, got an education. And then he also had a foosball table. So then played foosball. Had some, I'm not sure if I talked about drugs in Australia, but in Melbourne, I met up with a friend. He's an old friend. It's an interesting old story with him. I actually forgot. Like he always comes back into my life, which I really like. And, but it's always kind of like, I have reached out to him, when I've been back in Australia, but when I haven't, our paths have just crossed randomly. And I'd actually forgotten, and he reminded me when we caught up this time, and he came to my show as well in Melbourne, that when I was on my honeymoon in Cambodia, we ran into each other in Cambodia, of all places. And it was on this honeymoon that I was having the first kind of realization that my marriage was a terrible idea. And and I was having a really, it took me a long time to admit that my honeymoon was really hard work and emotionally challenging. And I ran into this friend in Cambodia. I remember running into him and just being like, and I think for a split second I was like, is this a sign? Because this friend, we also used to sleep together, and I actually kind of cheated on a long-term boyfriend with him. Like we were far apart, but at the same time, anyway, this long-term boyfriend knows this, and I told him eventually, and I probably should never have told him because it really upset him naturally. But anyway, and this was really the only boyfriend that I've actually cheated on. I'm sorry, Ben. Okay, let me move on. So, so this friend who comes back in and out of my life, and who's talked about moving to Berlin for a long time, but I'm not holding my breath. But it would be cool if he did, and I think he'd really like it. But we were comparing drug catalogs. So basically the list that you get from your dealer with all the prices, and comparing his to mine, Australia, like Melbourne versus Berlin. And, not that I'm a dealer or there's anything. I guess it's totally illegal, but I think it's still interesting to talk about, and I don't think I'll get in trouble, will I? I don't know. Let's do it. So in Australia, if you don't know this already, a gram of cocaine will cost you $300, whereas in Berlin, a gram will cost you €100. But more shocking, ketamine in Australia will cost you $300 for a gram also, just like Coke, whereas in Berlin, it's €30. When I was in Adelaide, I managed to get my hands on some quote unquote ketamine. When I looked at it, I was immediately like, this is not, it's not even, I can't even see the crystal, like the crystals aren't even, there's not even crystals. It's like powder. It's like fine white powder, which is just not how ketamine is. And I tried it and I was like, wow, Jesus, this stuff is so insanely weak and cut down. And it's like, what am I, just snorting baking powder, which I think I was, and I think I'm fine. But yeah, anyway, so on the pinball foosball date, there was also some variety of consumables enjoyed, and also just a really cool energy of like, let's do stuff we haven't done before. And and so, I will announce to the world that I have finally pegged someone. Oh, it's been like a couple of weeks of like me ticking off firsts sexually that I have had on my list for a while. So that was pretty exciting. I am going to try and write a bit about it. And then getting back to Berlin, I've already written a bit about it, but I ticked off another thing that I never really thought was on my list, but it got added recently. And in fact, like once it got added to my list, then another dude that I see was also like just randomly out of the blue was like, hey, Anna, I think I want to pee on you. It's at this point that I always remember that my stepdad listens to my podcast. But yeah, like the whole, humiliation play is an interesting thing. And I think once you sort of go down the kind of BDSM, dom sub stuff, humiliation play does kind of creep in pretty quick. And yeah, the idea of getting peed on, like, it's interesting, it's kind of like, there's something so primal about it, like all through history, we've been able to pee on each other. And so it's an interesting kind of base level humiliation, sharing, fluid exchange, power play dynamic. So I'm not going to go into too many details about that because I'm really enjoying the bit that I've just written. But yeah, okay, so that's sex. That's the Melbourne Comedy Festival. And then what else? I finished Post Office by Charles Bukowski. If you're wanting something to inspire you and again help you remember that usually you don't become creatively successful until your late 40s. So just keep that in mind. Feel good about yourself. Don't beat yourself up. I'm not worried about success. I'm succeeding right now, being able to live off comedy. So whatever. But just if you want an uplifting read, Bukowski's Post Office. I wouldn't call it an uplifting read, but it'll make you feel better about your life choices for sure, because his life was fucking shit for a while. And then the last topic I wrote down on my little list of things to soliloquy on is this whole topic of, oh my God, it's just exhausting. This whole topic of like having children and parenthood and like dating. I had another conversation with my mum today, and I love her so much, and she's not wrong. It's just there's this. And I caught up with a good friend recently, and we talked quite a bit about it. She's a bit younger than me, just a couple of years. And we were talking about this whole, I talked about the conversation. So I also had this conversation with my mum and my stepdad in Melbourne. Finally, like my stepdad helping us put this whole conversation to bed about, Anna, why don't you freeze your eggs? And I have explained it to my mum before, but it just hasn't really kind of settled in her mind, and I don't think she's really accepted my approach and decision around egg freezing. And so if anyone is interested in egg freezing, do it if you can, do it if you've got the money, do it if you've got, I don't know, if you're young enough, I think. But for me, it doesn't make sense to me right now. The logic doesn't hold to put my body through the pressure of extreme hormonal treatment in order to, like bang up the number of eggs that are going to drop out for them to then collect. It's a huge amount of physical and emotional impact that all those hormones have. And then doing that without having a partner to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing this for us, baby. Yeah, look after me. Like doing it just in the hope that I find a partner that I think would be a good father. I also met up with another friend in Melbourne who had a baby in November. Anyway, the baby's like less than a year old, and she is 40. And she calls me her, what does she call me? Like her miracle fairy. She holds me responsible for her baby because a few years ago in Melbourne for New Year's Eve, we met up on New Year's Eve, and she didn't have any plans that night. And I was like, oh babe, like if you're not doing anything, come with me to this party that I'm going to. I checked in with my friends. I'm like, can I bring a friend? They're like, yeah. So I take her to this party, and then within an hour she's chatting to this guy, and because she came to that party with me, her and that guy ended up dating, and then they moved in together, and now they've got a baby together, and she really thinks that I'm her Cupid, which is very, very sweet. But basically they were trying for a baby. It wasn't working. They went through IVF, and so the whole egg collection stuff. And her at the age of 39 or 40, they managed to collect like 15 eggs, or 19 eggs, which is decent. And they didn't even have to go through the freezing process. And within those 19 eggs, only 8 of them were usable. And then 3 of them resulted in miscarriages. And then 1 worked, and now she's got 1 egg left. Now, this is without even putting the eggs through the freezing process. So that tells you just how hardcore, like how the probability is stacked against you with this whole egg collecting process, and then like putting them in. So the eggs might not even take, they might not be good eggs, all of this. And if I were to go through this process, these eggs would also then be getting frozen. And you're looking at like €7,000 for that process. I've got a friend in Germany who recently did it. And then about €500 per year for the storage of the eggs. And then they might not even take, and then so to put my body through all of that for the possibility, and then who's to say that the guy I end up wanting to have as a father, who's to say that like his sperm will even work? Who's to say that my uterus will even like want to have a baby in it? There's just so many variables. So I had this conversation with mum, and finally, because she was always just like, oh, so you don't want to freeze your eggs. So I guess, you don't want to be a mum that much. And so I kind of like lost it at her, and thankfully my stepdad was there, and we had a really good conversation about it, where it was like, no mum, I do want to be a mum, but I'm not at that price, and I'm not going to put myself through that much pressure, and like financial, emotional, physical, for the possibility. Now, since I had that conversation, I've also been thinking, ruminating on this whole thing of like people. Like I still hold by the idea of not being with someone who I think would be a bad father to my children. Like I still think it's good for me to have that as a principle. Like I don't want to be with someone who I think would be a bad dad. Like that's pretty much an evaluation of that person's not a good person, for me. So I still like that as a principle. But whether or not I would say no to being with someone, what if you fall in love with someone and they don't want to be a parent, but you have a really good time with them? And you might want to be a parent, but you don't know if you could physically be a parent anyway. So this whole kind of mindset of like, oh no, you don't want to waste your time with someone who doesn't want to have kids, or you don't want to, it's like, surely a relationship and how you interact with someone is more important than the potential shared future that you could have. Like, I don't know. And I'm just sort of looking down the barrel. I'm 36. I'm 36. I have no idea if I will be able to have kids. And the idea of saying no to love based on, also people can change their minds, right? Like my mum told me this morning on a chat, she sort of brought up this story, and I think she brought it up as a bit of like a, fair warning to me kind of story. But the story was, she's got a friend who got married when she was in her mid-20s, stayed in it too long, wasn't a good marriage, finally left. She was free of him in like around early, like mid-30s. Then she met a guy when she was mid-30s who was 10 years younger than her. They fall in love, relationship continues, and then one day she's like, all right, well, I'm ready to have kids. And he was like, oh, actually, nah, I don't want kids yet. And then boom, this woman, like the relationship ends, and then she's alone for 15 years, and she's since found someone. But yeah, she like didn't have kids because of that situation, but she also didn't have kids because she left that situation. Like turning your back on love because because of the whole baby thing, I just think might be a little bit naive. I don't know. Anyway, these are some of my ideas. This is where my brain's at right now. I just really wish the whole motherhood, parenthood, child topic was less pressured and present. And like, yes, I want to be a mum, but it's like, I just want there to be a bit more of a thing in society that's like, but it's totally cool if that doesn't happen. And that's not a marker of, a complete and fulfilled family life or life. I'd like to experience it, but like leaning into the, it just might not happen. And actually just a good partnership is something that is more of a priority than being with someone who wants to have kids, but it's not a great partnership. Yeah. Maybe we can have it all. Who knows? Okay, guys. Well, those were my musings. I will be back on the pod doing this properly. This is proper, but you know what I mean. I'm super excited to be back in Berlin. Lots of summer shows coming up. Döner Comedy is coming back. And it looks like I'll also be doing a Döner Deluxe showcase as well. But just confirming the dates for summer. If you're in Berlin, come by, come to the show, come see me. And spring is here. I hope you're all feeling a little bit more positive. The sun is coming out, and excited to have a guest on my podcast this week coming. So guys, thank you so much. This is Adults Only Comedy Berlin. It's just been me today. Thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye.